Here are 3 mysteries that still haven't been solved. The world is a beautiful place, isn't it? Well, not always. Let's darken the tone a bit. Number 3. The Boy Scout Camp. It was just the second day of camp. 22 Boy Scouts and 9 adults were there to supervise them. They had just started their trip. It happened during the early hours of April the 26th, 1970. They had set up camp in the open air, forming a circle around a campfire to fight off the cold. Some slept in their sleeping bags outside, while those who were colder stayed in the tents. The 9 supervisors spread out to cover as much territory as possible. The night was calm. Everyone slept peacefully until the first light of morning began waking them around 7:30 a.m. That's when they realized not everyone had made it through the night so peacefully. As they walked through the camp, they found Terrence Bowers, still in his sleeping bag, surrounded by a pool of his own blood. When the police and medical examiner arrived, they saw he had been stabbed in the chest, the back, and several times in the arm. The wounds on his arm were likely the first ones. He had tried to defend himself. The coroner concluded that the wounds were extremely recent. At the latest, they had been inflicted between 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. That's just about an hour before everyone else had woken up. What was most bizarre, though, was that even though the sleeping bags and tents were all just a few meters apart, no one heard a thing. And sure, that might be a clue in itself. But no matter how you think about it, it still seems strange, especially to me, since I'm a light sleeper. Of course, everyone is different. Some people sleep so soundly you could blow a horn next to them and they wouldn't wake up. Others, like me, wake up at the sound of a fly in another room. But 21 kids and 9 adults? Statistically, at least someone should have woken up. Unless they did and pretended to stay asleep out of fear. Everything felt off. They searched the area. They never found the knife. There were no suspects, no witnesses, and no motive. Terrence wasn't hated. He was just an 11-year-old kid on a trip. Eventually, a man, Robert Weekly, who had previously been in the Scouts, confessed to the murder, claiming it was revenge for having been expelled because of Terrence. Apparently, he had previously been accused of abusing some of the kids. Of course, the police interrogated him, but he failed to provide the key details that only the real killer would know. Most obviously, he couldn't say where the weapon was. It's very important to confirm those things. As crazy as it may sound, there are people who will falsely confess to crimes they didn't commit, sometimes for attention, sometimes to protect someone, sometimes because they genuinely want to go to prison. In the end, nothing was ever proven. The most plausible theory is that it was an attempted kidnapping. Someone who knew the group's route and their camp location tried to abduct one of the boys, but when Terrence resisted, they panicked and stabbed him multiple times. What supports that theory? An adult would have had the strength to cover his mouth, which could explain why no one heard anything. Still, since Terrence had cuts on his arm, he clearly fought back, which means he must have made some noise. It's hard to imagine someone resisting silently in the middle of the night. What doesn't make sense? Well, for starters, who would risk kidnapping a child sleeping among 30 people just meters away? Sure, Terrence was on the outer edge of the circle. But still, it was a dangerous plan. And if the goal wasn't kidnapping but a straight-up execution, then maybe it makes a little more sense. But only if it was one of the person's first times committing a crime like that. Because it seemed clumsy. Stabbing a sleeping 11-year-old that many times? Clumsy in the sense of choosing such an exposed setting for it. There was a similar case involving Girl Scouts, but in that one, there were multiple victims and signs of abuse. And that brings us to the second big mystery. This one? It happened only once. And when you think about how random it was, that the killer got away without being caught, you'd think someone with that kind of mindset would feel invincible and try again. But they didn't. Want to make it even weirder? I mentioned that the morning light woke everyone up around 7:30, but in truth, there was enough light to wake up by 6 a.m., exactly when Terrence was being attacked. That only leaves 2 possibilities. The coroner was wrong, and the attack happened much earlier. Or that morning, many people kept their eyes shut tight, pretending to be asleep. Mystery number 2. The Cursed Lighthouse. Stories about the sea, supernatural or not, have always existed. And unlike the rest of the world, the ocean often has the power to make those stories feel real. In 2018, Sophia McKenna's ex-boyfriend, Spencer McFord, took this photo at 2 a.m. at Caser Lighthouse. located off the southeastern coast of Connecticut. Old, weathered, and full of local legend, the lighthouse was known for being haunted by its former keeper, a man who allegedly jumped to his death from the top and whose ghost has since protected the place. It's a silly tale, maybe, but it draws people in. That was the reason they went there in the first place, to take a spooky photo at a supposedly haunted site at night. That was the adventure they had planned for the weekend, most likely fueled by a few beers, not just because Spencer already looked flushed in the photo, but also because sneaking off to a place like that at night isn't exactly responsible, especially since, to get there, they stole a small boat that belonged to the campus. Here are two screenshots from a video they filmed during their trip. One shows Spencer from behind, rowing toward the lighthouse. The other shows them leaving the shoreline. During the day, the sea is beautiful, but at night, as soon as you leave the city lights behind, it becomes one of the darkest and coldest places on Earth. Their little adventure started well. No one caught them stealing the boat, and they made it to the lighthouse and took this photo. Even the simple sign that said "No trespassing" was proof enough that they had made it there. But something happened, and it happened fast. Just 5 minutes after taking the picture, Spencer's phone, since Sophia's phone was left in the car, started calling her mom repeatedly. He called at 2:05, 2:06, and 2:07. At 2:08, he called 3 more times. He tried once more at 2:09, and then the calls stopped. They both disappeared. Between 6 and 7 a.m., Sophia's current boyfriend noticed she wasn't answering his calls. He saw the photo and the video she had posted, both of which only showed the departure, never their return. That's when he raised the alarm and reported them missing. 2 days later, they found the missing boat near the coast. And 2 weeks after that, Spencer's body was found floating in the water. Sophia, however, was never found. So, even though it seems fairly clear what might have happened, let's reconstruct it. When they arrived at the lighthouse, they noticed Spencer had tied his shirt to one end. It's believed he used it to anchor the boat just long enough to take the picture. But before he realized it, the boat must have come loose. Now let's be clear, that night wasn't particularly cold. The sea was calm and the waves were small. The boat was drifting, sure, but not quickly. So, considering that Spencer was a good swimmer, it wouldn't have been a big deal for him to go after it and return. He probably handed Sophia his phone and told her, "Wait here, I'll be right back." But that's when several mistakes happened. First, yes, the night wasn't especially cold, but the water was still around 11 or 12 degrees Celsius, about 52 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't take long for cold water to sap your strength. Fatigue becomes the real danger. Anxious to chase down the boat, he jumped into the sea, probably underestimating how far it had drifted. The next mistake. Even strong swimmers often misjudge distances at sea. The ocean is deceptive. Things look closer than they really are. From the lighthouse, the boat might have seemed within reach, but in the water, it wasn't. And even if he managed to reach the boat, he wouldn't have been able to row it back. Trying to climb in would likely capsize it. Whatever happened, those 4 minutes in the dark must have felt endless. Sophia, seeing Spencer not return, panicked. She started calling her mother. People find it odd that she made so many calls without leaving a voicemail. But it's really not that strange. It was the middle of the night. The repeated calls were clearly intended to wake her mom up. She didn't want to wait until morning for her to check a message. But then, what happened to Sophia? She wasn't a strong swimmer. Seeing Spencer disappear, she would never have jumped into the water by choice. If she didn't call 911, maybe it was because she didn't think it was that serious at first. And by the time she realized it was, her phone battery might have already died. Alone in the dark, screaming for someone who didn't answer. Here's the big question. Why didn't she stay in the lighthouse? There was even a staircase next to where they took the photo, leading up to a wider, safer platform. It would have been the perfect place to wait. Someone would have found her eventually. Even without the photo, they'd searched there. Maybe she fantasized about swimming back to shore. It's possible. Even if she knew she wasn't a strong swimmer, panic can make us do irrational things. And again, the sea distorts distance. Another theory is that she didn't jump, but slipped. Maybe she lost her footing and fell in by accident, unable to climb back up. Whatever the case, she remains missing. And that's also strange. They found Spencer's body. They found the bodies of 2 other people who drowned nearby that same week. Sophia is the only one who never turned up. Mystery number 1. The girl who stared at the sky. She acted like she was scared of everything, paranoid almost. That's how Carly behaved during the school party held one Friday in 2018. She had smoked marijuana. It wasn't her first time. At 16 years old, she had already had a few talks with her parents about it. But she wasn't a problematic teen. She was curious, more than anything. It didn't affect her grades, and up until that night, it hadn't affected her physically either. But during that party, something changed. Her boyfriend noticed she was acting like everything terrified her. The crowd, the music, the very atmosphere, as if something awful was going to happen. She couldn't say exactly what it was, just that she felt she could die at any moment. People described her as paranoid, and it certainly looked like a psychotic episode. Maybe she had taken too much, maybe it had been laced with something. But whatever the case, she was terrified. So much so that she called her stepmother to pick her up, even if it meant facing the worst punishment of her life. They got home around 9 p.m. Her stepmother, Melissa, made her dinner and hid her phone in her pocket to secretly record Carly. The idea was to show her the video later, to use it as a teaching moment once Carly had calmed down. A questionable method, in my opinion. It can easily make someone defensive. Nobody enjoys watching themselves being mocked or vulnerable, with very few exceptions. Anyway, Carly apologized. She admitted she had made a mistake. Her stepmother told her it was okay, that everyone does things they regret sometimes. When Melissa brought her a salad, Carly hesitated. She said it was the devil's lettuce. She was scared of the salad too. She didn't want to go to sleep either. She told her stepmother she thought she was going to kill her. Melissa tried to calm her down, telling her that was ridiculous, that she would never harm her. It worked, at least a little. Carly began to settle, though she kept expressing this overwhelming fear, like something bad was going to happen no matter what. At one point she asked, "If something bad happens to me, will you call 911? Melissa assured her she would. Eventually, they went to bed. From here, Melissa offers two different versions of what happened next. In one version, she went to her own bed and got up twice during the night to check on Carly. Once at 5 a.m. and again at 7 a.m. In the other version, she says she slept with Carly in the same bed. In either case, when she got up at 7 a.m., Carly was gone. Not in her bed, not in the house, nowhere nearby. So, keeping her promise, Melissa called 911 because now something truly terrible had happened. Someone so scared they were terrified of everything had vanished into thin air. Witnesses said they saw her walking along a road. When asked if she looked frightened, they said she seemed surprisingly calm, but they did notice something strange. She kept looking up at the sky. They never found a body on that road. So the most likely theory is that she encountered someone who saw how vulnerable and disoriented she was and abducted her. Wandering in that state, alone, she wouldn't have gotten very far. There are other theories. Carly's biological mother cast doubt on her ex-husband and Melissa. She found it odd that when her ex called her to break the news, he said, "Carly is gone." To her, that word, gone, sounded too final, too much like dead. Later, while looking at a police map of the search area, she told them, "You're looking in the wrong place." She also claimed that in the recording, Carly begs Melissa to call 911, but Melissa refuses. Now, it's possible Carly's mother just wants to blame Melissa for not protecting her daughter, but it's still strange that she didn't call 911 herself. Your daughter is pale, wide-eyed, terrified, clearly unwell. People at the party said she looked bad. If you're her guardian, wouldn't your first instinct be to call for help? Drive her to a hospital yourself, even. In the end, the most likely explanation remains abduction. It's hard to believe that something like that could happen in broad daylight. But here's the thing, it did. This is where it happened. A desert-like area with just a few scattered houses. Carly was walking toward Highway 6. That means around 7 a.m. She was right here. This is Highway 6. She could have walked along it until she couldn't anymore. She could have been out there for hours until someone came by and picked up the girl who stared at the sky.